Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Devin Sears, and I'm joined by Carolyn Shelby. And today we are talking about making WordPress SEO make sense, a practical masterclass for agencies. So, as people build their websites and as they build their brands and their small agencies or building their small businesses, or if you're building a client site, SEO is always a hot topic. But before we get into that, as I mentioned, we're joined by Carolyn Shelby. She is the principal SEO at Yoast, and we are lucky to have her with us today, sharing her knowledge and experience. She has a long history of SEO at a myriad of different companies, and we're thrilled to have her share her experience and expertise with us today. Before we jump into the actual content, however, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. One, if you can hear us, find the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from. That lets us know that we are transmitting to you. That lets us know that you found the chat box, and that lets us know where you're tuning in from. So we love hearing where our attendees will be joining us from. Number two, if you found that chat box, you can use that to ask questions throughout the webinar, and also just give general feedback. If you do have a specific question, however, we ask that you move that to the Q&A thread, which is right next to the chat box. That gives us a chance to have a threaded response. So if it is a specific question, we can have a specific response to that. The number one question that always gets asked is, will we be sending out a recording of this webinar? And the answer is yes. Everyone that registered will be receiving a copy of this webinar sent to their inbox 24 to 48 hours after we finish this webinar. So we're thrilled to have you with us. If you have any problems, either with the audio, with the slides, or anything like that, we suggest just leaving the webinar and rejoining, and that should resolve most of the issues. And I believe that's everything. So with that, also, I will be off camera and off mic answering questions as best as I can. If there are questions that I don't know the answer to or that I think would benefit the larger group, I'll hold those for the end, and we'll have a Q&A to ask some of those questions. So with that, Carolyn, please take it away.
All right, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here today. So let's get started because I know we have a limited amount of time. Today, this class is for agency owners, project managers, client-facing devs and marketers, and anyone trying to make a WordPress site rank. So if you're one of those people, buckle up, here we go. And if you do have any questions, do make sure you ask because I'd love to get some great questions in the Q&A at the end. All right, so here we go. What we're covering today, we're covering technical SEO, structure, crawlability, speed, content SEO, clarity, intent, and structure. Again, there's a lot of structure happening lately. Offsite SEO and reporting, which, I mean, arguably, I would say, with the changes that AI is bringing to search in general, your offsite SEO is actually becoming a little bit more important than it had been. I think there was a trend over the past decade or so to not necessarily get rid of offsite SEO, but minimize its impact in the rankings because it was, I mean, to be fair, a little gameable. So that is one thing that we're working on mitigating. But with AI now, it's almost like the clock's been wound back. Anyway, we'll get to that. The reporting, I expect most of you are client facing or you have an agency. Reporting is important because it's how you prove to your clients that you're continuing to do a good job for them, and it's how you show the value so that they keep writing the checks. It's important that you know what to report on and most importantly, how to explain what you're reporting on. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then sprinkled through, we're going to be talking about how AI has changed the way search is functioning, where it's going in the future. And we're going to add in a little bit about the llms.txt, which is a new thing that Yoast is doing. And I'll talk about how you can add that in for your clients to not only show value, but also to help them see that you're proactively future-proofing their website. So I think that'll be a benefit for you. Chapter 1, Technical SEO. So your technical SEO, realistically, you want your site to be solid, you want it to be crawlable, and you want it to be fast. If you don't have those things, you're building on sand, and at some point something's going to start collapsing and you're not going to be able to recover it. Common disasters that people tend to inherit: someone's going to come to you and they're going to say, my website doesn't rank, I need you to fix it. And you're going to look and see that it's uncrawlable, and that's why it doesn't rank for anything. Or it's poorly crawlable, or it's full of robot traps. It could have hundreds of orphan pages. It could have nothing but thin content. It could have gotten hit by the helpful content update and just never recovered. And that helpful content update hit it because it was thin content and not helpful content. That's why. It could be hacked. It could be compromised. You'd be amazed how many sites I see where they don't know they've been compromised. If one of the first things I do is I'll look to see what you're ranking for. If you're a church and you're ranking for Viagra, I can guarantee you've been hacked in some way. And there's some work that's going to have to be done to clean that up. Generally speaking, though, clients don't know why they're not ranking, and they don't even know really what they should be ranking for. They know what they want to rank for, and whether or not that's reasonable or feasible is part of your job as an agency owner to explain to them and help. I wouldn't say necessarily bring them back to reality, but you want to set reasonable expectations, manageable expectations, so that they're not expecting to be number one instantly for cell phones or for hosting services. You can't do that overnight. That kind of trophy term is very competitive. So if you have a client that's brand new and has no history there, and they want to be number one overnight for a highly competitive term, you're going to have to readjust that expectation and help them understand in a polite way, but in a firm way, that there are competitive terms, and then there are facets and variations of the competitive terms that might not be quite so cutthroat, and it might be better to kind of take a maybe I'll borrow some war analogies here. You want to take a flanking strategy rather than a head-on attack. A head-on attack is going to get repelled. A flanking strategy might be able to sneak in around the corner and help them achieve their goal. Their goal ultimately isn't to rank number one. Their goal ultimately is to make money. So as long as we continue to rephrase things for our clients in terms of, this is working because your revenue is increasing, this is working because you're getting more conversions, you're getting more signups, something that's affecting your bottom line is improving, it's not going to matter so much that they're not ranking number one for this vanity term that they want. Because it's not anymore about how much raw traffic are you getting, how much do you rank specifically number one for this particular term right here. Now, especially going forward, as the LLMs change how rankings work and how search is functioning in general, it's not going to be enough just to rank number one for your favorite term. That may not be what your business needs. What every business needs is to make money. So operate from that perspective. And I think you'll have good conversations with your clients. You'll have productive conversations with your clients, and you'll be able to manage their expectations. So some of the common pitfalls that we encounter in technical SEO, especially when we're onboarding a new client, they will come to me sometimes and have 60 plugins. And if you're thinking to yourself, 60, that's not so bad, we should probably talk later, because 60 is in fact actually super bad. You want to keep your client sites lean. You don't want to rely too heavily on plugins to do things that you could hard code in yourself. Once you start getting too many plugins, you're running the risk that something's not going to play nice with something else, and that will cause problems, and that will take the site down. Or it will slow the site down, which we also don't want. Or it will do something that is going to impede the crawl. You do not want to impede the crawl, because if you impede the crawl, you won't get indexed. If you're not indexed, you can't be surfaced in search results. You block the bots, you get a poor crawl. You get a poor crawl, you get low or no rankings, and then you get no traffic. You get zero visibility, and that will, why should they keep paying you if they're not getting any revenue from the engagement? Bloated themes and scripts are another problem. Again, people like bells and whistles, don't they? And I think now, especially, we're getting to a point where your content matters so much more than the bells and whistles on the site. People may not be experiencing your site on the desktop, and the majority of your bells and whistles are going to be desktop. If the majority of the traffic that comes into the site is on mobile, focus on that. People aren't anymore looking to be entertained by your website, unless entertainment is, your thing. What they're looking for is to get the content and the answers that they want. They're asking questions and they want an answer. So don't go with a bloated theme. Streamline themes. I don't even know that you need a builder. I know there's a lot of builders out there, but some of them can add a lot of bloat to a site. Too many scripts. Not only are scripts unnecessary, but scripts can prevent the LLMs, the AI crawlers, from reading some of your content, because they will not execute anything. Anything that requires a click or a user interaction, they're not going to do. So if you have content that's hidden inside of a script, like a JavaScript toggle, you're going to want to phase those out, because it's going to be better for your client if you do that. If your client is missing an SSL certificate, obviously that's bad. That's an easy fix. Nobody wants to use or reference an insecure site. It's going to throw error messages all over the place. Most people have antivirus software on their computers. Those pieces of software will not even let people go to websites that are not secure. So you could be missing out on traffic. You're certainly not going to get any favoritism shown to you by Google or the other search engines. So just take care of that base level, because it's necessary. Not having caching is going to damage you in 12,000 different ways. People that don't understand how caching works frequently won't have it installed, or they'll have it misconfigured, which can also cause a lot of problems. Broken permalinks. Broken links is basic housekeeping that you should be cleaning up immediately as soon as it's found. What broken permalinks, especially within internal linking within the site, it's poor housekeeping. It's like not bothering to sweep your front stoop and then wondering why no one wants to come knock on the door. Like, it's basic. You really need to take care of that. And also, it can result in a loss of link equity. If you have, let's say you have a missing page, but Wikipedia linked to it, just fix that URL so that it resolves, and you've just recouped a ton of authority and juice, for ranking that website, and your clients will thank you. So take care of the basics. This is all easy tech stuff that you can handle. Your minimal viable setup for any client is going to be a clean, lightweight theme. I do really like lightweight themes. Reliable, fast hosting. If you're running, let's say, Lighthouse reports, or you're looking at the Core Web Vitals, especially in Chrome, when you get that Lighthouse report, it'll tell you what the biggest problems are. And if the biggest problem is the time to first byte coming from the server, like the server response, that's your hosting. That's not something that, as a web developer, you're necessarily going to be able to fix without doing something at the hosting level. So do make sure that you've got a reliable host that's fast. Make sure you've got at least some simple caching in place. There are WordPress plugins that come with caching. There are hosting providers that have basic caching that is part of the package. And then there's also like Cloudflare, which you can use. And most hosting providers that I've seen do have some kind of easy integration with Cloudflare. There's caching available at that, even with the free packages. That's easy to set up. Make sure your images are compressed. And when we say resized doesn't necessarily mean the physical size of the image. And if you're saying to yourself, duh, I apologize, but you'd be surprised how many people don't realize this. The physical size of the image is not what we're talking about when we say resize. We're talking about the file size. And there are ways that you can maintain a certain sized image and still reduce the file size of that image. You can change the dots per inch, the DPI. You really don't need more than like 72 dots per inch if this is a web only view. If you're going to be printing, like not print out with a printer, but like commercially printing an image, 300 DPI for sure. But the difference in the same size image in 300 DPI versus 72 DPI is like megabytes. Do not use full commercial print quality images on your website. It's going to slow your site down. Very, very bad. And I would naturally, for a minimum viable setup, recommend having Yoast as your SEO plugin. But if you're not going to use us, do make sure you use some kind of properly configured SEO plugin, because it is going to be helpful. It's going to take care of a lot of the basic things that you need to have set up on your site. It'll automatically generate your sitemap.xml and maintain it. So as you make changes to your site, those things will get updated automatically. And it does allow you to set defaults and catch-alls for things like page titles and meta descriptions, things that, yes, you should really be defining them on a per page level, but sometimes content producers don't. So if you have the option of setting these catch-all variables, they may not be perfect, but they won't be empty. And that's a huge step forward right there. So let's talk real quick about core web vitals. Are core web vitals important? Yes, they are important. Do you have to be perfect and have hundreds in everything? Absolutely not. Frequently, your core web vitals are more of a thing where you don't have to be, if you said, if you're running away from a lion, you don't have to be the fastest gazelle, you just have to be faster than the slowest one. That's kind of how it is depending on your industry. If in your industry, everybody is pretty slow, you just have to be faster than everybody else. So don't chase perfection. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Go for good. If you can get all green lights, all above A, let's say, A, I think in the scores is 90 to 100. So it's not even like college scores. It doesn't even have to be a 94. It just has to be 90 or better. If you can do that, I think you're in really good shape. If you have scores coming back that are like in single digits, yes, I would be incredibly concerned about that, and I would make an effort to fix it. Anytime you've got something that's coming back not green, like orange, I would work on it. Red, absolutely work on it. Avoid for not red. Doesn't have to be all green. Definitely go for not red. Fast hosting is going to matter more than the performance tweaks in general that you can do at the development level. So again, your time to first byte or your server response, that's not something you as a developer are going to be able to fix. It's not something you as an agency are going to be able to fix unless you're also managing the hosting at the server level. If you are managing the hosting at the server level, address those issues, because it's a selling point for you, honestly. And the one quick way to lose a customer as a host is to have a slow server response. That's just the way it is. So the real issues you're dealing with, you want to deal with your slow servers. You do want to deal with layout shifts, because CLS, which is the content layout shift, not only is that important for the search engine, specifically Google, but now with the way Google is grading your paid ads, it's looking at that too, and it will kick out ads that have too much content layout shift. The good thing about the way that's working with paid, though, is I believe their window for tolerance is like 8 seconds. If you have stuff continuing to shift after 8 seconds, you have very, very large problems, my friend. So I would make sure that you deal with that. And then again, the huge images, which is generally something that's very easy to fix, but people just ignore it. Pennies add up to pounds, right? You don't want to fill your site with unnecessarily large images because you're adding weight to how fast it can run. You can run a lot faster when you're not carrying a suitcase full of rocks. And that's essentially what these overly large images are. So, what is going to improve your rankings? A site that loads fast, a site that's stable, and a site that works on all devices. Do that for your clients, you'll be in real good shape. What I would recommend that a lot of you do is start prepping your clients for AI SEO. The AIs and the large language models, the LLMs, they're not really reading and consuming and indexing your site the same way that the Googlebot does. So it's important that we're providing little tools and helpers for them as they come in and look for specific bits of content. One of the easy things to do is add an llms.txt file, which lives at the root, like a robots.txt file does, but they have two entirely different functions. So don't think that because you have a robots that you don't need the llms.txt. For one thing, I should state this is not a standard yet. The standard has not been defined, and there's only a few LLMs that are using this. But I expect that if this proceeds the way like sitemap.xml's did and the robots.txt standard did, it will become a standard at some point. So file is really easy to make. It's called llms.txt. You have to name it exactly that. It has to live in the root. It tells the AIs how to read and understand your site by giving it an easy to read treasure map that points to all the buried gold around your site. You don't use it like a sitemap. It's written in Markdown, so it's not plain English, but it's also not the same syntax as the sitemap.xmls are. Markdown is very similar if you've ever edited a Wikipedia page. Wikipedia on the source end is also written in Markdown. Markdown is very easy. There's actually, we'll drop it in the chat. I have a URL to an article that I wrote for Search Engine Land just a couple weeks ago that includes a sample file that you can copy and paste and then use as a template. What you don't want to do is, like I said, make it a sitemap. You're not dumping all of your content in here. You're explaining what your site is about. You're giving the elevator pitch, and then you're in categories list the articles that are either the most popular, the most relevant, or the most core to what your website is about. Because what we're doing is we're anticipating what the LLM searches are asking, and we're giving them a map to find that content faster. That's really all this is. Now, if someone comes back to you and says, this isn't a standard, this isn't going to help anything, or only Perplexity is using this right now, nobody else is using this, I would say, number one, all those things are true. Number two, this is a very easy thing to create. It's not going to hurt anything to have it, and it will put you ahead of the curve if you have it before it becomes a standard, because the engines and the bots will already know that your site has it, and they'll have seen it already. So it's not going to hurt anything to have it. There's no damage that you can incur by having this on your site. You don't have to build it manually if you don't want to. That being said, it's really easy to build manually, so I wouldn't be afraid of it at all. Yoast, though, will generate one for you automatically and then keep it updated. So as maybe new articles are added or new cornerstone content is added, Yoast will go back and refresh that for you. And again, it's not a sitemap. You do not need to include everything. It's only as useful as your content is good. Having this point to a bunch of garbage content is not going to help your case at all. So having good content is something that you should absolutely focus on. And then when you have the good content, you create the treasure map to the good content. That's the only way that's going to work. Treasure map to junk is not helpful. So what this will do, if you do this correctly, it can mitigate the damage from a bad design, but you cannot rely on this Band-Aid in lieu of fixing actual problems. Do you absolutely need this if your site is perfect? No. If your site is perfect and there's not a single thing wrong with the crawl, you have beautiful navigation, nothing's locked up in JavaScript, everything is literally perfect SEO wise, you don't need this at all. But you also don't need a sitemap, and you also don't need a robots file. So it's there to be a helper, and it's there to offset some damage that you might be doing because the client insists on having some sort of bell and or whistle that is otherwise not entirely conducive to the crawl. That's where that goes. All right. For technical SEO, you need to make sure you have crawl structure and indexation locked up. Keeping your navigation simple and structured is vital. If you have navigation that HTML structure-wise, I would really recommend that you keep your navigation in some kind of ordered or unordered list. Just having the links separated by like line breaks, that's not good because that structure is not conveying to either Google's robots or the LLMs that come through that this group of words that you've got in the navigation is navigation for one thing and is grouped together logically for another thing. It almost looks like just somebody just barfed keywords up on the floor. Like there's no structure to it. You need to have structure. You need to make the pages easy to find, not just for the users, but also the bots. You want to avoid crawl traps too. Orphaned pages, which are pages where if they can parachute into it, they can't get back out of it. That's an orphaned page, or a page that they can't get to without going through your sitemap or without some external link taking them there. If they can't crawl to it, they will pretend it doesn't exist. So do make sure that you do not have orphaned pages. You don't want JavaScript only content, and you don't want endless filters. That's something that some of these e-commerce sites do is they have, every time you filter something, it creates a new URL. So you have to make sure that you don't have 7 or 8 URLs that are effectively unique pointing at the same piece of content, because that's when you start ending up with duplicate content problems. So cover your basics. You want to have a robots.txt file, a sitemap.xml. You want your canonical tags to be correct because canonical tags, remember, function like a soft 301. If your canonicals are broken or screwed up, it will, I cannot understate how badly that will screw up your site. Either make sure the canonicals are correct or do not use canonicals. If you have any question in your mind whether or not that canonical is functioning correctly, it's far better to remove it than it is to have it be wrong. Also, make sure you're not misusing no follows or no indexes. You should absolutely not be, if you have a link to your homepage at the top of the page, and then you have another link to it in the footer. If you no follow or no index those other links at the bottom because you think that you're sculpting the crawl, you're not, because what's going to happen is, especially Google, they'll see the link up here and then they'll see the link at the bottom. If the link at the bottom is no indexed, or I'm sorry, no followed, they'll apply that no follow to the top too. It will affect every link to that same destination page on the entire page, and you've just now no followed your homepage, which is dumb, and no one should ever do that. So please do not misuse those. Make sure everything you're doing is carefully constructed and correct. And use the correct redirects. 302s are not good. Use 301s, please. Don't think a 302 is good enough because it's not. It isn't. I don't know how else to say that. All right, let's move on to chapter 2, which is content SEO. So why content structure matters. As we're moving now into a world where Google is, they are actively losing market share. Are they losing a ton overnight? No, but ChatGPT and Perplexity and the other LLMs are picking up a lot of the search traffic, and people are starting to move exclusively into like ChatGPT. They rarely go back to Google now once they've fully kind of embedded themselves and bonded with their ChatGPT instance. The LLMs interpret your content differently. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're providing the structure to your content that makes it easy for these LLMs to understand what's happening. They're not really reading per se. They scan and they break things into chunks. Then they evaluate the chunks. they synthesize and regenerate like a summary of everything that they've read. And if you're not providing the bits, the morsels of content for them to kind of chew up and then regurgitate into these summaries, they're just not going to include the stuff that you've said. If your content is too complicated, they're going to skip it. Does that mean that you have to write like, Dick and Jane level stuff? See Dick run, see Jane run, that kind of stuff? No. It just means that as much as I love meandering prose, you have to tone that back a little bit. You don't want to make these machines work too hard to understand what it is that you're trying to say. So well-structured content, proper HTML, good sections, good subsections, sentences that aren't terribly long, maybe one main topic per paragraph. That is how you get more visible in the AI-driven search results. When you're writing for the humans and the AIs, you want to make sure that your content is structured, skimmable, and clear. So you want to make sure that you've got your H1 on the page, but you also want to make sure that you've got real H2s and H3s nested appropriately, because it is supposed to be like an outline. I don't know if you did outlines in school. I did. If you don't know how to do an outline, you might want to read up on that, just so that in your brain you understand that the H2 is there to support the H1. H3s will support the H2 that they're under. You can have multiple H2s all supporting the H1, but you really shouldn't have an H1 support another H1, if that makes sense. You'd like to probably break subsections up every 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe a little bit more, but not too far apart. You want your sentences to be clear and easy to understand on first read. Avoid using too much jargon unless that jargon is specifically what you think the user's looking for. I'll caveat that. Use bullet points to break down concepts. And when you use bullet points, use actual bullets, unordered lists or ordered lists with list items, not emoji pictures cleverly spaced so that it looks like a list to the human eye, because it won't read like a list to the machine, and that's a problem. They love tables. They love it because it helps them make comparisons fast and scannable. They like FAQs because the FAQs not only clearly and quickly answer questions, but they also tend to have some structured data associated with them. That's another thing that Yoast can do for you. This is not a sales pitch, though. I'm just saying it'll do that. Make things bold or italicized to help call out emphasis, because that works for humans and for the machines. If you really want someone to notice a word, you boldface it. If you use the B tag in, it's not B anymore, it's emphasis, EM. So if you use the EM tag to create emphasis around that word, that will be picked up by the machines too. So you can write for the humans and the robots at the same time and make things clear and understandable to both. When you're looking at your keyword strategy as you're developing out your content strategy, we're entering a phase where if you're just repeating content that other people have written, you're not going to be getting as much organic traffic to your site that you used to enjoy. What they're looking for now really is unique content and value-added content. So don't just chase high-volume keywords and generate fluff or regurgitate what someone else has already said about it and think that you're going to rank, because you will not. Have a unique perspective, have a unique point of view, do something original to support that. But you have to focus on the intent of the keyword and the intent of the search in order to make the content that's good for the reader. You want to mirror your user's language. The example I gave on the slide here is papal versus pope. And this is something that we talked about when I was in the newspaper all the time. You wouldn't say in your headline, Chicago braces for papal visit, because only hardcore Catholics are going to search for papal. Most people think pope. Is the Pope going to visit? Not, is there a papal visit? So you'd use the word Pope because that's the word people are going to use when they search for it. You want to mirror how real people talk, because how they talk is how they search. You also want to align your content type with your query intent. So If you think they're looking for a how-to guide, make a how-to guide. If you think they're looking for a list, create a list. If they're looking for information on a particular service that you offer, create a service page. Just make sure that you're meeting the user's needs, because if you're focusing on meeting the user's needs and writing in a language that they speak in, you're going to be rewarded. Write the answers to your questions, provide value, and be useful to your users. Good posts and pages have descriptive titles. You want to say what it is, not something cute. And I would argue you don't want to be too salesy either. And it's not on here, but along with don't bury the lead, don't push the primary or target keyword phrase to the end of your descriptive title or to the end of your meta description. If it's an important keyword phrase for that page, it should be up front and center. This way, it's not going to get truncated. It's clear to everyone that that is the focus of your page, and it's going to help you rank better. When you answer questions, also don't bury the lead. You don't want to have a 5-paragraph preamble before you provide your recipe. You don't want to have, oh, here's a good example. Back to the newspapers. So when I was at LA Times, Leonard Nimoy passed away. And the headline of the obituary said, TV's beloved Spock dies. And then there were 7 paragraphs on his life before they got to the phrase, Leonard Nimoy has died or is dead, or any variation of his name and dead. The fact that the title, the headline, didn't have his name in it was a problem. It didn't rank for Leonard Nimoy obituary or Leonard Nimoy death because it said Spock. Now, you might say, everyone knows that Leonard Nimoy was Spock. Well, fun fact, there's been multiple Star Treks, and there's been multiple characters or multiple actors playing Spock. So we don't know that. Also, there was a Dr. Spock, and there's a lot of, in cosmetic surgery, when you get Botox, if they do your Botox wrong on your eyebrows, it's called spocking because it looks like Spock. The point is, it wasn't clear in the headline what the target keyword phrase was. And the target keyword phrase was Leonard Nimoy has died. And they did not say that in the title. They also buried the lead. They didn't say Leonard Nimoy has died at the age of 86 at his California home until, like I said, I think there were 1,000 words before they got to that. It didn't rank at all, and they were very upset because when they do it correctly, they would get millions and millions of hits for celebrity obituaries. So it has always been important, but it is even more important now that we're shifting into AI, that you are writing clearly and concisely, and you're clear about what the target of the page is. When you add your headings every 2 or 3 paragraphs, which are going to help the readers and the engine scan, you want to make sure that you're using actual H tags, not just bold-facing a paragraph or using a span and CSS. That is not HTML, that's CSS. When I say that you need to use headings, you need to use H tags, H2, H3, H4, whatever, but it has to be an actual heading tag, not a span or a div or a creatively styled whatever via CSS. That's bad. If you can add a call to action at the end of your page to help the reader decide what to do next so they don't just leave your site, that's always helpful too. So that in general is the anatomy of a good poster page that you're writing for your clients. For your content cleanup strategy, because if you're inheriting a site from someone else, you're probably going to get a lot of garbage. You do want to go through and remove your useless pages and archives. Archives would be like tag aggregation pages or category pages, which generally you don't want to get rid of, or the date archives, but only if they add no value. If there's a page within there, or if a specific tag aggregation page has valuable backlinks, or if it's used for navigation, do not delete it. I've seen sites where in the navigation, the actual top level nav, they're linking to tag pages to help the user navigate the site. That's also how the search engines navigate your site. And if you no index or no follow those pages, they'll get on the page, they won't see anything, and they'll get stuck there. And that is not what you want if you want them to be able to adequately and appropriately crawl your website. You want to redirect your outdated or duplicate pages to the most relevant live page. Bulk redirecting pages to the home page is a bad strategy and it's lazy. Don't do that. It's not good for rankings. And I would imagine if I were a client, I would be very upset if I saw that. Do you combine thin pages into one strong, useful page? Google has always appreciated a deep well of information versus a cookie sheet of information. So if you have pages where there's not a ton of content and you have lots of pages that have different aspects of the same topic, but just little itty bitty bits on each page, just combine that into one long page. Look at how Wikipedia ranks. Wikipedia has pages that are miles long and they rank like crazy. So granted, a lot of that is backlinks, and I'm not gonna lie about that. However, I did run a test when I was working for a very large company that tends to have rodent ears. They had an issue where their superhero website wasn't outranking Wikipedia, and they felt that this was an egregious crime against humanity. It turns out that on their pages, they had multiple thin pages that only addressed one specific aspect of the hero's backstory, whereas Wikipedia had one page that could collect all the links and had all the information, and it was constantly outranking that. So even the company with the rodent ears that has literally more links than God couldn't outrank a very, very deep, well-structured information page. If that's not a vote for having deep information, I don't know what is. And then when it comes to internal linking, I know a lot of people are like, well, you just want to make sure that you link to other articles that are useful to the user. Yes, you do. This is 100% true. But I would like you to have like a codified strategy about how you're doing your linking. So what I would recommend is do a content inventory for the client, assign keyword phrases to each piece of content, and that's going to be the phrase that that piece of content owns. You will then have a list of, if this phrase appears anywhere else on the site, I will link that phrase to this page consistently. And I'm communicating then a strong signal to the search engines that this page is all about this specific keyword phrase. It owns that page. If you are an expert in your field, you tell the search engine, this particular page is what I feel is the source of truth for pink jujubes. They'll believe you. If you link to 5 different pages with pink jujubes, they're not going to know what the best page is. By being consistent about the internal linking strategy and the anchor text you're using for each of those pages, you're going to be communicating to the engines exactly what you think the best page for each keyword is. So don't do it haphazardly. Do make sure you have a strategy. And I think that's something that you could easily bill to your clients as a value add. We've created this internal linking strategy for you. This is exactly how you execute it, and then enforce that execution. All right. Reporting on your content success. When you're reporting to your clients, make sure that you have a story to tell, not just show numbers, because they're going to look at the numbers and they're going to ask you for an explanation anyway. Have an explanation and make sure that it's a narrative that you're willing to own, right? The metrics you should be tracking: rankings, impressions, conversions, revenue. I would focus less on organic traffic, because as AI starts taking over and changing how search works, you are across the board going to see a decrease in organic traffic. And it's not anything you're doing wrong. It's not anything the client's doing wrong. And it may not adversely affect revenue. It's just the way things are happening now. And rather than show them graphs that are going to make them sad, I would focus on the graphs that are going to make them happy and show them that there's other things that are more important than just that raw organic traffic. Make sure you're using clear visuals. If you can turn something into a pretty graph, I would turn it into a pretty graph. You want to highlight your changes, not just the raw numbers, because sometimes, we went from 2 visits to 4 visits. Doesn't sound nearly as impressive as we increased traffic 100%. So, be thoughtful about how you're presenting the information and be thoughtful about how it's going to be perceived by the client. But that being said, be consistent in exactly what you're reporting on. If you have consistent reporting that they can then compare month over month, I think the client is going to feel like you're doing a better job communicating, and they'll be more likely to continue paying you to provide that service. All right, let's move on to chapter 3. So off-site SEO and client communications. Backlinks do matter. Citations, which are effectively backlinks without the link, also matter. They provide validation to the engines and corroborate basically your claims that you or your client are who you say you are and are good at what you do, right? If you were awful at what you did, you wouldn't have a quote in the local newspaper, or you wouldn't have someone else linking to you. If you're bad at what you do, you don't get links. If you're bad at what you do, you don't get cited in publications. It's just the way it is. So the machines know that if you are linked to or if you are cited, then you must be doing something right. That is how they decide who's offering a good service and who's offering a not good service. And that's how they make decisions about who they reference in the answers they give to people. Good PR is good PR. Get it when you can. If you're a local business, you do need to make sure that you're listed in your Google business profile. If you can get into Yelp, etc., you want to do all those things. If you're a local business and you don't have a whole lot of backlinks, I would personally recommend, for one thing, you want to send out press releases and regular communications to your local newspaper, because local newspapers have websites. High school newspapers have websites. College newspapers have websites. You can sponsor little league teams. You can sponsor bowling leagues. There are lots of things you can do locally that will result in backlinks from websites that are not spammy. They're not bad to have acquired, and it doesn't fall under the umbrella of buying links, because you're not buying a link. You're getting a link because you sponsored the team. There's a might be a nuanced difference, but there is a difference in those things. The best links and the best citations you can get are real citations that are within the content, the body copy of a web page. Don't buy footer links. Don't buy spammy directories. If someone puts you in a footer link for free, that's probably not the worst thing in the world. If someone puts you in a spammy directory for free, probably not the worst thing in the world. Do not buy these things. Do not pay money for those things. Don't pay for spam injected into forums. Don't pay people to spam Reddit for you. If you're paying someone to spam, at some point, you're going to get found out, and either you or your client will be punished for it. If your client gets punished because of something you did, you will be in big trouble. So just don't engage in those practices in the first place. Let's talk a bit about citations and how to structure the mentions and how they affect what we're calling modern authority signals. If you can get yourself or your clients mentioned on authoritative sites like guest posts, have them interviewed, a news feature, get them on podcasts, all of these are going to be good citations that support your entity, which I hope you have, and it's going to support the field that you're in. It's going to support your reputation. It's all going to reinforce what you've told Google you're good at. If you tell Google that you're good at grooming dogs, but then you're on a podcast about making chocolate, that's going to be a conflicting signal that probably won't help. But if you get on a podcast about, for dog aficionados, that will help support your expertise and your authority. So look at each client individually, determine what types of things are going to help them, and then help them get on and get those placements. It sounds like PR because it is PR, but that really is where the industry is heading. So if you can assist with that, that is definitely a billable service that will greatly benefit all of the other things, including SEO. When you do manage to get these links, make sure that there's consistency in how they reference your site, say your name, the social links that they use, the way they provide the description. Consistent messaging is going to help influence how the AIs are repeating what they know back to users. If you were to ask, let's say ChatGPT, what's the best vacation itinerary for when I take my preteen to Paris? It's going to say, you should definitely go to Paris Disneyland because it's a magical experience. Paris Disneyland, okay, sure. Standard mention, right? It's a magical experience. Why would it say it's a magical experience? Because Disney's really, 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 really consistent in all of their messaging that it's the Magic Kingdom and you'll have a magical time and it's a magical experience. The AIs didn't pull that word out of nowhere. They got that from the consistent messaging that company uses. And you can do that too, but you have to be consistent in your messaging. So, entity formatting, how you spell your name, the website that you send people to. Does it have www in it? Does it have a trailing slash? Does it have no trailing slash? Make sure you're consistent about that, consistent with your description, consistent with your social links. If you can get natural links in the body text, that's way better than a footer or a bio. All of these things are going to train those search engines and the LLMs to associate your brand with authority and relevance in whatever topic it is that you're pushing. For reporting on this stuff, make sure that you're avoiding vanity metrics. Vanity metrics, well, I shouldn't say that entirely. If you have a client who's very adamant that there's a specific vanity metric that they're looking at, provide that to them. Sometimes your client reports to a CEO that desperately is obsessed with ranking for something that doesn't matter to anyone except to him. If that's the case, it's not going to kill anything to make sure that you are doing well in that thing that doesn't matter and that you're reporting that back to them, because if it makes the CEO happy, he will continue to sign your checks. But in general, vanity metrics are not useful to report on. For your monthly updates, obviously you want to show wins. You want to be able to explain any shifts like a decrease in organic traffic, which will come. You have to be able to explain it, so know why it's happening, what it's affecting, and if it is affecting revenue, try to help them develop a plan for either addressing it, mitigating it, offsetting it, something that's going to help them recover from it. They're coming to you because they want to feel like you've got a plan. So your job is to tell them that, yeah, this might be bad, but it's okay because here's our plan to fix it, or here's our plan to address it. They want to know that you're taking care of them. So make sure that you're doing that. And just remind them, especially with SEO, this is not going to be an overnight thing. You cannot go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. It's a slow build, not a quick fix. The reporting cadence that generally keeps them happy. For monthly tasks, I like to show crawl errors, broken links, and indexing issues, because we can, as we're fixing those things, which you should be consistently working towards fixing, you can show progress every month. This is what we started with. This is what we ended with. These were some new ones that were introduced. We're going to keep iterating on that until everything's fixed. You want to check the rankings, not just on the key pages, but I also like to pull all of the rankings, even for things we're not tracking, because it helps us understand if there's something that maybe we're not communicating as well as we would like. And it can help fine tune the messaging on pages. It can also be an advanced warning siren that you've been hacked, because if you start seeing weird rankings show up, you know there's something wrong that you need to investigate. Content refreshes, I mean, I would obviously report on that if you're doing it. I don't know that a specific number is going to be required for absolutely every client, but if you do them, you should absolutely report on that. You should report on, this is where it started out with the rankings at the beginning of the month, after we did our update, and now this is the end of the month. So if there's any movement at all, you want to be able to report on that. And an internal linking audit is also useful, just to show that, there's been new content written. This is the number of new internal links we've placed. These are the keywords we're focusing on. All those things are monthly, and those will make the clients happy. For quarterly, full technical audit, speed, crawl, core web vitals, the whole shoot and match. Look at the site structured. So the structure, specifically your schema, making sure that you've got pages that are passing validation. Make sure that in GSC there's no errors. those kinds of things. They want to know that their client or that their website is structurally sound. So that's a good quarterly thing to keep an eye on. The content audit, pretty standard, what's on the screen, kill, keep, combine. Competitive benchmarking is useful if you can track what their clients or what their competitors are doing. They will like to see how they're performing versus their competitor. One of the things you might want to be conscious of, though, is the competitors that some of the tools identify for your clients aren't necessarily the competitors that your clients see as competitors. So I would get a list of who they perceive to be their competitors, and I would track those people. I would not necessarily track what the automated tools are coming up with, because the automated tools are usually looking at keyword overlap, and that keyword overlap can really give you some weird results. So ask the client, stick with that. That will make them happy, because those are faces they recognize, and those are companies that they have an emotional interest in beating. It'll please them. Then annually, a keyword strategy refresh if it's really necessary, but it's a good time to do it once a year. A review of the plugin, the theme, the host, if there's any issues with the speed there. Checking the llms.txt output, I would do that more often than annually, actually. I would just check to make sure everything's cool weekly, to be perfectly honest. But giving them a detailed analysis of the LLMS and maybe show them how often it's been checked, if the number of times it's visited by the AIs is increasing over time, that would all be useful. Checking the structured data, though, in a very in-depth way is going to be helpful, especially it's not something you have to do all the time. I think annually is probably enough. You should watch it more often than that, but the client doesn't necessarily need a deep dive on it more than once a year. And then just generally make sure that the SEO strategy aligns with their business goals, because the goal is never just get more traffic. The goal is make more money. Sometimes with some clients, getting more traffic does equate to making more money, but not everybody. In fact, that's going to start getting to be fewer and fewer people. Figure out what makes them money and work towards that. That's what your goal is. Not getting to be number one, not just getting more organic traffic, because anybody can drive garbage traffic to your site. And oh, look, you've got more organic traffic. That's not the goal. The goal is make your client more money. Focus on that. So action steps for your agency. I would start with, for every client, a full technical audit, a content audit, and then benchmark their current rating or rankings, just so that you've got something to work off of and you can see how that changes over time. I would clean up their content structure to make sure that you're going to get a clean crawl. And I would search for your brand or their brand and see what the AI tools are surfacing. There's a number of new tools that are coming out. Some have just launched, some are about to be launched, that specialize in telling you what the LLMs are saying about particular brands. If you don't want to wait for that, you can just go ask them yourself and they'll tell you. But once these tools come out, I think the reporting will become a little bit easier. And just if you've got Yoast installed, check to see that the llms.txt output matches what should be on the site, because it's pulling from what the description is set. It's pulling from the cornerstone content that's already defined. It's pulling from things you've got in the site. And if it's generating weird stuff or things that you don't think should be there, that's a sign to you that something's misconfigured within the tool and within the site, so that you've got to go back and fix those things. All right. I think that's it.
Awesome. That was a lot of information, and I appreciate you going through it so thoroughly and so effectively. We have a handful of questions I'd love to ask. We don't have a ton of time, so we'll probably just go through a few of them. But I'd love to pass some of these questions along to you. The first question I have is, do we really need to optimize core web vitals if our site is already fast?
If your site is fast, you don't need to optimize core web vitals, because your scores will already be good. That's the easiest way to say it. Yeah, if If it's a problem, deal with it. If it's not a problem, then you're fine. That's really, those are pretty simple things to deal with. Don't let anyone come tell you that, oh, you've got to fix this because it's not perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to score 100 across the board unless all of your competitors are too. And if all your competitors are too, then you'll know it. So I wouldn't worry about it unless there's something to worry about.
Perfect. Next question I have here is what's the best way to show SEO results to a client who wants a quick win?
You know what? That one's really difficult because unless there's something actively broken on their site that you can fix right away, SEO isn't necessarily a quick thing to fix. Um, Honestly, the most fun clients are clients that come to you with something terribly broken that I know I can fix quickly, because then they're like, "Oh my God, you're wonderful," because it was an easy to fix thing. Um, Whatever that quick win is going to vary wildly depending on the client. I would look for things that can be fixed, like if there's a crawl blockage and then you sort of unblock that blockage, things are going to turn around quickly. I had a client once that had in their navigation, they were linking to their category tag and category archives. And in their settings, they had all of those no followed and no indexed. And they're like, we can't figure out, we've got all these pages and nothing ranks. And, new page might rank for 5 minutes because it's linked to you from the homepage and then it goes away. So I looked and went, boop, and changed that. And within a week, their traffic had increased 30% and their rankings were all up all over the board. And they were so happy. So it is possible to get those, but you just have to look for it. And it really is going to depend on the client and what their setup is.
That makes sense. The next question I have here, does llms.txt really matter right now, or is it more for the future?
I would say it's largely for the future because it's not widely adopted yet. What triggers wide adoption is when a lot of people or so many people are using it that it's really difficult for the engines to ignore. So, my strategy is to get everybody doing it because it's so easy to do that there's really no reason for them not to pay attention to it because it's something everyone's providing. And it is super, super easy. There's really no downside to putting it in place. I've heard some people, some SEOs complain that it's making it easier for your competitors to scrape your site. And my reaction to that was, I don't think you understand what it does because there's nothing that it's pointing to that your competitors wouldn't be able to get to anyway. So it's not helping anyone scrape your site. It's showing the LLMs where the good content is. That's it. So I wouldn't, there's no downside to it. I've struggled to come up with a downside. There isn't one. It's an easy thing to do.
Awesome. That's perfect. The next question is around content. They ask, how do we explain chunked content to clients who prefer long form?
You can have chunks within your long form. It's when we say chunked content, we mean you want your, okay, best example here. So have you ever read Vanity Fair? It's a 18th century, 18th or 19th century literature, British literature, or Moby Dick even. There are single sentences in those books that span 3 pages. That's not what, when they say they want long form, that's not what they're asking for. Long form just means there's a lot of content on one page. You can still have reasonable bite-sized sentences. And by bite-size, I don't mean, very, very staccato and
Right.
short and written for a second grader. I just mean understandable on the first pass. You
Yeah.
don't have to write for third graders. You can write for eighth graders. You can write for high school seniors, but you don't want to have a lot of meandering prose. You don't want to have the intro to Moby Dick. You want to have something that's just slightly more readable than that. You can absolutely have long form. Um, there's really no reason you can't have both. I like to tell people that what we're doing is the words and the chunks are basically like Lego pieces, and you have little Lego pieces and you have longer Lego pieces, but none of the Lego pieces are unreasonably long. And you're
Yeah.
building your page by just stacking up the Lego pieces because the LLMs want to come by and they just want to pick and choose which pieces they want to use. If you use a piece, if you start gluing pieces together, which is effectively what you're doing if you create these unnecessarily long sentences, they can't take the piece because it's glued. So don't glue your Lego pieces together.
I like that analogy a lot. We're going to ask one or two more questions, but I'm going to advance the slide real quick just in case anyone has any further questions about how to get assistance from Bluehost. Obviously, Carolyn's from Yoast, so you can also reach out to their helplines for any questions about Yoast specific SEO or just SEO questions in general. But one or two more questions. How do we handle a site built with a bloated theme and outdated plugins?
Well, for one thing, outdated plugins should be gotten rid of. I know sometimes that's difficult when you really depend on it, but if they're not being actively updated and maintained, there's security risk. So, absolutely, you need to either find a way to function without that plugin or find a replacement for that plugin. And once you get rid of those plugins, you have to delete them from the system because even if they're installed and inactive, they are still an attack vector for hackers. So absolutely, you have to get rid of outdated plugins. If what was the other part? A builder,
A bloated theme.
a bloated theme. Um, if you can sell the client on a clean theme, I would try to do so because there's so many things that a bloated theme can cause problems with. It can cause problems with some of your plugins. It can require weird plugins that maybe aren't maintained, and that's going to cause problems. It can make it difficult for the crawlers to navigate the site because there's weird things in JavaScript or it's just messy. It's messy and big. Because what you want to do is you want to have a clean site that loads fast and is just easy on everybody. The people aren't coming to your site to be dazzled. They're coming to get good information. So make sure that they can get good information and they can complete their transaction or do whatever action it is you want them to do. They don't need glitter. They don't need bells and whistles. They need functionality. So find a way to design an aesthetically pleasing brand compliant site that doesn't need a lot of junk.
Gone are the days of the MySpace pages where you'd have an animated background and music
No,
that played and
there was a reason that those died.
okay. Last question here. Let's see. They ask if Yoast auto generates it, do we still need to worry about it? And I'm assuming that's about the structure of some of the
The
content.
llms.txt
Yeah,
file
yeah.
probably. Um, I would double check it just to make sure because it's pulling from the settings that you have in WordPress. And if you didn't fill out your description or
Mm.
your site, was it the site description? Or you didn't fill out the site logo, or you don't have a meta description on your homepage, there are things that it's looking for that if you don't have those filled out, it's not going to have that data to include. So you'd be missing out. I would recommend looking at it just to make sure it reads the way you want it to. You know, when I was testing it, I noticed that I didn't like the pages it was picking. And in the first iteration, the pages it picked were based on how recently the page was edited. And it just so happened that one of the pages I had edited the most recently was the copyright page and the contact us page. And I don't need those linked to. I want something meaty. I want the about us page linked, you know. So all I had to do was go back in and just re-edit things to change the timestamps and then it fixed it. So there's little things like that it's going to do what it thinks is best, but it doesn't know your content as well as you know your content. So I just review it to make sure that it's telling the story you want to tell.
Yeah, and I think that's actually incredible advice for anything when we deal with AI, right? Like we shouldn't necessarily get completely dependent and reliant on it, but more so use it as a tool to save us a couple minutes here and there, save us some time, and do some of that the work that is perhaps a little bit more tedious. But we should always review that and make sure that it's still accurate. Completely
Yeah.
agree. Awesome. Well, I believe that brings us to time today. I want to express my gratitude for you to joining us today and sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. And I want to express my gratitude for everyone that attended and engaged with us as well. We really appreciate that, and we I know this is going to be very beneficial for a lot of people. So thank you so much for joining us. All right, bye everybody.